How do you seize a tanker, protected by a Russian nuclear submarine, without starting World War II?
On January 7, 2026, the U.S. found the answer.
The target was the Marinara, a shadow fleet vessel carrying Venezuelan oil.
Hiding behind a freshly painted Russian flag and an attack sub escort. Moscow tried to block the US Coast Guard, but American, British, and European air power changed the game.
These advanced Poseidon and Seahawk helicopters started dropping a net of sonobuoys from the sky,
Clearing the path for the cutter Monroe to seize the ship.
Here is how it happened.
On Wednesday, January 7, 2026 morning in the North Atlantic, a geopolitical chess game turned into a kinetic military operation.
The United States enforcing a strict blockade on Venezuelan oil Moscow had explicitly placed under its protection.
This is part 1 on what is a shadow fleet.
The operation was the climax of a weeks-long standoff rooted in the U.S. government's aggressive new, complete blockade of Venezuela.
Identified by U.S. intelligence as part of the Shadow Fleet, a network of vessels.
The target is this vessel, originally the Bella 1, a rusting 15-year-old tanker.
Used by Russia, Iran, and Venezuela to transport illicit oil and bypass sanctions.
But how is Russia involved?
In December 2025, the Bella attempted to run from the U.S. blockade near the Venezuelan coast.
When intercepted by the U.S. Coast Guard in the Caribbean, the female African-American captain refused to stop.
Shut off the ship's transponder, going dark.
And fled into the open Atlantic, initiating a 4,000-mile pursuit. What tactics and deception did they follow?
During its flight across the Atlantic, the crew frantically attempted to change the ship's legal identity.
They repainted the hull, renaming the ship the Marinara, and raised the Russian flag.
Moscow simultaneously added the ship to its official registry,
Asserting that any attack on the vessel was an attack on the Russian Federation.
As the tanker steamed toward the strategic gap between Iceland and the United Kingdom, Russia dramatically escalated the stakes.
Intelligence confirmed that Moscow had dispatched an attack submarine.
Likely a formidable Yasan or Akula class.
with explicit orders to escort and safeguard the vessel.
This was a calculated denial of area threat. By lurking silently beneath the waves, Russia hoped to force a retreat.
From the U.S. Coast Guard cutter,
which lacked the heavy weaponry to engage a submarine.
To complicate matters further, Russian warships were reported in the vicinity,
creating a defensive screen that forced American commanders to proceed with extreme caution.
knowing that one wrong move could spark an accidental naval war. Despite the silent threat lurking below, US, British, and European command gave the green light.
To seize the vessel.
Their strategy was bold.
Neutralize the Russian submarine, not with torpedoes, but with overwhelming air superiority.
Leading the surface chase was the U.S. Monroe, a Legend-class cutter.
That had stalked the Marinara for weeks through brutal Atlantic swells.
But before the Monroe could met its move, the sky had to be secured.
U.S. and British P-8 Poseidons swarmed the sector.
Formation confirmed. Air assets deployed.
Dropping a net of sonobuoys to track the Russian subs' every movement. While KC-135 Stratotankers kept the surveillance dragnet aloft 24/7, the British Royal Air Force joined the hunt.
Deploying rivet joint aircraft to strip Moscow's communications bare.
At dawn on January 7th, the trap snapped shut. The P-8 effectively boxed out the submarine, signaling that any aggression would guarantee its own destruction.
With the underwater threat pinned down, the Monroe closed the distance.
The Atlantic seas were too violent for small boats,
So the operators went vertical.
In a precision assault, special operations teams fast roped from hovering helicopters directly onto the tanker's deck.
Within minutes, they secured the bridge.
Cut the engines.
and raised the American flag. The Marinara was theirs.
But to truly understand the power of these Seahawk helicopters and the strategy driving the Coast Guard,
we have to turn our eyes to the United States military.
we'll also look at how amphibious warships, destroyers, and MQ-9 Reaper drones operate in a coordinated manner to create oil and drone blockades near Venezuela. The warships and destroyers act as command centers and launching platforms.
Deploying helicopters and surface-to-surface missiles for direct attacks.
Meanwhile, MQ-9 Reaper drones provide continuous aerial surveillance and real-time intelligence,
Using advanced sensors to locate and track targets with great precision.
These drones can also carry and launch precision-guided missiles to strike vessels.
This integrated approach enables rapid detection, tracking, and multi-directional strikes.
combining the firepower and mobility of ships and helicopters with the extended reach and endurance of drones.
Together, they effectively intercept and block Venezuelan oil vessels and drug boats.
Now, let's take a closer look at the strategy and basic process of how MH-60 Seahawk helicopters are launched.
From amphibious warships, the operation begins in the amphibious ship's command center.
where intelligence about suspicious vessel activity is gathered and analyzed. Once a potential target is identified, preparations for launch begin. The MH-60 Seahawk takes off vertically from the ship's flight deck.
As the helicopter climbs, it begins its hunt for targets.
Using radar, electro-optical, and infrared sensors, the Seahawk locates fast-moving vessels involved in trafficking.
After identification, the helicopter strikes with precision. Whether missiles or machine guns are used, dominance is maintained.
This is how the United States enforces maritime control without escalation.
We also made a deep dive into the sea, air, and land components of the nuclear triad.